Welcome back to the show, my friend. I'm so happy that you're here, and I want you to take a moment to just be proud of the fact that you are taking time out of your busy life to listen to something that is going to make your life better. That is huge, and I always want you to celebrate those small moments where you are making yourself a priority. And speaking of priority, today we're talking about why it's not only important, but it is crucial to start seeing your own needs as a priority. So today, I'm talking to all of my people pleasers, the ones who bend over backwards for others, who are constantly putting their own needs on the back burner, who are constantly seeking external validation in order to feel good and accepting of yourself. And you are going to learn why having people pleasing as a personality trait or something that you've developed maybe through your childhood or experiences in your life can be correlated to the way that you view your body, the way that you feel about your body, and then the resulting actions that you might take, like dieting and disordered eating in an attempt to get other people's approval. Now, I don't want to give too much away because this conversation was fire, and who better to talk about people pleasing than a recovering people pleaser? Today, we are joined by Meg McCabe, who is a life coach and CCI certified eating disorder recovery coach. She's the founder of the Recovery Collective, a global eating disorder recovery community. She's also the host of the Full and Thriving podcast, a top-ranking mental health podcast, and we have such a good conversation coming for you. So if you are ready to learn how to break free from people-pleasing so that you can start putting yourself first, showing up for yourself and becoming the most authentic version of yourself, not just for you, but for everyone around you, then strap in. This is going to be such a powerful conversation for you. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. All right, Meg, I am so happy to have you on the podcast and to be talking about body image and the link between body image and people pleasing. As you and I both know, I'm sure that you see this in your clients all the time. People pleasing can really be intimately involved in how we see our bodies and how we manipulate our bodies. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, you're so welcome. I'm so grateful to be on the show and to be talking about this. I truly have always been unpacking the roots of my eating disorder history. And the more I look into people pleasing, the more I realize it was a major root for my eating disorder and a root for many other personal life struggles that I had to overcome. So I am so ready to be an open book with you today.
I love that. So can you start by telling our listeners what they can expect to learn from you today and how might their life change by taking what they learn and applying it to their life?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing that your guests are going to learn today is, first of all, that awareness. So what exactly people pleasing is, how does that look in life, period? And also how it impacts body image. So we're going to take it that extra piece further and be like, okay, if you are struggling with body image, this is how people pleasing might be impacting you in a way you didn't know about before.
I love that. So as I was telling you before we started recording, I am one of the lucky few who actually am not a people pleaser. And I know that when people hear that, they're like, what? I feel like everyone is at this point. But can you even educate me on, and our listeners on, what even is people pleasing and where does it come from?
Yeah. Okay. So people pleasing, first of all, has this icky connotation, right? Like, I hate the sound of being a people pleaser. It's tough. We don't want to think we're always pleasing people all the time. But the crux of people pleasing is really putting everyone else's needs and emotions and feelings and priorities before yourself. So while you are living life, you're going to disown your own values and who you are as a person in order to maintain that relationship or like feel accepted by that person.
And do you think that that comes from fear, low self-esteem? Like, where does it come from?
It's a really good question. So I think part of it is this fear of not being accepted or this fear of being judged, or even being a burden, right? So there are a few things in place. And even saying, like, oh, I have this fear of being a burden, that feels heavy too. Like people don't like admitting this, but a lot of times people pleasing is, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. So I will take on the discomfort. And I will do the thing that's hard. So a people pleaser, sometimes it's the person who says, okay, someone asks them, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? And the people pleaser goes, no, whatever. I'm happy with anything. And they keep their opinions to themselves. That's a harmless example. But over time, you just get so used to disowning your needs and expressing yourself and even expressing your emotions. So it can be really painful. Like my worst example of people pleasing wasn't necessarily the eating disorder. It was being in an unhealthy relationship where my partner wanted to move across the country to Colorado. And I basically pulled the cool girl card. And I was like, oh, I'm so chill. I don't care about me at all. I'm just going to move across the country and be away from my friends and family and my ambitions and leave my cool job to just totally devote my life to your vision. So it can get very extreme. And if you're not aware of this, it's going to set you up to have a painful life that you don't even recognize because it's not authentic to you or what you want.
It's so interesting as you were talking about that, because especially when you were talking about being a burden, I started smiling because I started thinking, am I a people pleaser without even knowing it? Because I can definitely relate to this fear of being a burden and doing the hard things because I don't want to give it to someone else. Right. And I was the youngest of 5 kids. And so I really often felt like I was a burden. And this wasn't intentional, but I'm starting to see how, okay, maybe there are some people pleasing traits in me and I didn't really know it. So I'm thinking, for any of my listeners who are like, I don't know if I'm a people pleaser or not, what are some like signs and symptoms of it?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, signs and symptoms with people pleasing, again, it's always making sure, like a really simple example is trying to maintain the peace at all costs. So you lose your voice, right? So maybe you're in a work meeting and someone says something that is a bad idea and you're like, that's going to suck for the company. You don't say anything because you want to maintain the peace, right? There's also lack of boundaries. That's another one. So maybe you have this family member who's always asking you for favors and it's super draining to you and you feel taken for granted, but you're not going to say no or set limits around that because you don't want to hurt their feelings or like rock the boat, right? So then those are really good examples. It's always about, again, another example is trying to control how you are perceived as well, right? So that's maybe the third example and that's where body image comes in, is I want this person to like me and accept me. So I'm going to do everything in my power to be likable to them, whether that's authentic to me or not. And that's where I feel like people pleasing and perfectionism come into play. Is like perfectionism also has this way of controlling how you're perceived. So I find there's a lot related in
Absolutely.
both.
And when it comes to people pleasing, and if we start talking about body image and trying to control how people perceive you, I was actually having this conversation with a client last night. And would you say that a lot of it comes from giving your power away your power of the weight of your own opinion and your own perception about yourself and giving it to others and thinking that if I get their validation, then I will start feeling good about myself.
Yes, I think seeking validation is a great example of another trait of a people pleaser, right? So you are constantly, as a people pleaser, giving your power away so that people like you more, they respect you more, and they accept you more. And that validation is a great way to feel good about yourself. So a people pleaser doesn't necessarily feel good about themselves without that validation, right?
Mm,
So I struggled with feeling good about myself if people didn't like me, or if someone had a bad opinion about me or negative opinion about me, that would really impact me. So the opinions, thoughts, and feelings that other people had about me were really important. So
yeah.
tying it back to body image, I was, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I'm like in middle school and high school, I was super awkward and I didn't date. Like I just felt I was kind of an outcast. And I found that dieting and focusing on my appearance would get me that validation I needed to feel good about myself. So all of the praise I received as someone on a diet that turned into an eating disorder, that really motivated me to keep going because I finally felt special and valued and like I was important. As coaches, we ask, how is the eating disorder serving
Yeah.
us? And so for me, that big answer was it's making me feel valued and accepted. And the only way I was really gauging that was what people were saying about me and saying to me. There was no sense of self like, I'm worthy because I am. It's like, I'm worthy because everyone around me is telling me how thin I look and how great my outfit is. And this is where I'm deriving my worth.
Yes, absolutely. And I can totally relate to that. Like, I remember getting compliments about losing weight and finally feeling like I was seen. And I was also the awkward girl in high school. I was so much taller than everyone else. And I just like, I didn't feel like I fit in. And so when I ended high school and I started getting recognized and started getting boys' attention, the thing about external validation is that it's artificial, right? It's not like you're not actually feeling good about yourself. And if you really sit with it, you start to recognize that it's a band-aid. And what I like, and I'm sure you do the exact same thing, is when you're working with clients is you're digging and you're trying to find, okay, what are all of the different root causes and what's happening underneath the surface? And I love that question of like, how is this serving you? With everything, there's going to be a cost and there's going to be a benefit. And if you don't bring awareness to both of those things, then you're going to keep feeling like you're in this tug of war of saying, I want to change, I want to change, I want to heal, but you keep getting in your own way.
Yeah, it's like we wouldn't keep repeating the same unhelpful patterns if they weren't serving us in some way. So, back to my eating disorder story, I had anorexia with like the binge purge subtype, and I blatantly ignored that fact because I was benefiting from being that thin person and the behaviors were serving me at that time. And it wasn't until the literally and figuratively the scale tipped, right? I started to open my eyes and be like, this isn't sustainable long term. This isn't actually giving me a feeling of self-worth. Like I'm hinging my entire identity on this body. And I had a modeling career connected to that. So my entire identity was connected to this body, but I wasn't feeling authentically worthy, right? Or confident from within. It was only from what I was reading on the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. And if someone is like either a slight people pleaser, like I am starting to open my eyes that I might be, or you are a chronic people pleaser to the point that you are constantly bending over backwards for other people. You are sacrificing your own needs, your own time, your energy. I mean, I'm sure you've had clients like this where I would have some of my clients who were always like volunteering for the school functions for their kids and giving all their time and doing the bake sales, and they had no time for themselves. And so let's say that you are a people pleaser. I guess my question would be, and you're starting to notice how it's affecting your relationship with your body, because you're hoping that if you look a certain way, you're going to get external validation. Where do you even start? Like, where do you start building up this internal sense of self-worth and of strength and of power?
Yeah. Oh, so good. There's so many different directions to take it related to body image and not related. But if we're focusing on body image, a really good question to ask yourself is, if I spent the day alone on the beach, would I really hate my body?
I ask that question all the time. I love it, Meg.
It's like if I was on this beautiful beach vacation by myself and nobody else was there to look at my body and I wasn't there to feel their presence. I think there's like a lot of sensitivity around being a people pleaser. Like you just feel people looking at you. You're self-conscious because you're so afraid of how people perceive you, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I was at the beach and I was all by myself, how would that beach day be different? And if there is a difference, that means there is a part of you that might be a people pleaser, right? Maybe you go to the beach and you typically don't frolic in the waves, or you don't wear the bikini you want to wear, right? But if you were by yourself, maybe that would look so much different. So just acknowledging and owning up to the fact that the presence of other people impacts how you feel about your body day to day. And that's okay. Like, first of all, people pleasing isn't always bad. Like, it's good to help other people. It's good to care about what other people think. Like, we are humans who crave connection. That's a fact. It's better to be connected to others. It's just recognizing that your craving for connection and acceptance is harmful to the point where maybe you feel like you need to change your body to maintain that sense of safety and security among others.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think there are some ways that people could practice healing that people pleasing tendency, right? Maybe it's weight gain might be the hardest place. Like, maybe don't start there, but exposing, okay, what would I wear? Like, if I wasn't concerned about what everyone in the world thought about my appearance and if I fit in, what would I do differently about my appearance? What would I wear? And that's that's an interesting question to think about, because when I ask my community this, they come up with really interesting things. Like, some girls are like, you know what? I think I would wear more makeup or lipstick, but I'm always concerned about looking like I'm trying too hard. Or some girls would be like, I would wear bolder prints and bold colors because I typically don't do that because I don't want to be seen in a room. For me, when I answer that question as a fellow tall girl, it's heels. It takes a lot of self-awareness and courage to wear heels, even now, because I feel like I'm making other people feel uncomfortable if I'm 6 feet tall and I put on heels and I'm like 6'3", 6'4", and walk into a room and I hear all of these people shorter than me make comments about my height. Right? Because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. So I think that's another good place to start, is asking yourself, even on like an appearance level, what am I doing to make everyone else comfortable or manipulate how I'm perceived? And what would I do differently?
And for you, on those days where you're like, you know what, I want to wear heels, how do you navigate through the self-talk and the past shame and the past fear and concern about what others might think? Like, what's your way of reframing so that you can just say, you know what, I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to feel confident about it?
It's actually really funny because when I do choose to put on the heels, sometimes I feel more confident, right? So there's this weird thing, like maybe you just have to go for it and try it and see. But I think as far as that self-talk goes, it's important to recognize and come from the place of, is there something else going on, right? Maybe I'm just having a really bad self-talk day. Like, or maybe there's something deep down that's bothering me. So I'm not in this confident headspace that I normally am in. So asking yourself, like, why is today one of those days I'm not quite feeling as confident as usual, and building awareness around that, right? But I truly do try to hype myself up. I mean, it's not always easy as someone who is a natural people pleaser to walk into a room and feel like everyone is worried about how short they are in comparison to me. I have to actually manage that self-talk and challenge it in the moment. Like, I love my outfit. I love my shoes. It's okay to be seen. I think that's another part that comes up a lot, is just being seen. Some people pleasers are afraid to be seen and take up too much space. And so in my world, I think that was a big part of the heels thing, was being in a moment where I am almost taking up so much attention. Like it's an attention piece too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's two things that
It's like
I
a
wrote
lot.
down. No, there's two things that I wrote down that I wanted to touch on. So the first one is working through that fear of being seen or being the center of attention. And what came up for me is I have this belief, and I think one of the big things that I hope that you listeners can take away is to start looking inwards at what are some of the core beliefs that I hold about myself. And usually they stem back from really early on, your childhood, things that happened in elementary school and high school. And for me, this is something that is so not a truth as an adult, but it's still present. And I have to keep reminding myself of it. I have this core belief that I'm only invited to things as a pity invite, which is like so far from the truth. And like I always like, I know that when I go somewhere, people are so happy to have me there, but it usually is around people who I'm a little less comfortable or familiar with. If I go to an event or a social situation, I have to talk to myself before I go, and I have to set intentions and kind of like seed in some new beliefs. And one of the most important ones is I just keep reminding myself, people are so excited for you to be there. Yes. And I keep reminding myself that, because what happens is when you then show up and you have this mentality of that people are so excited for you to be there, then you almost walk in as if, you know, when it's your birthday and people are waiting for you to show up, you walk in as if you're like, everyone is there, excited to see you. You show up differently. You're more confident. You're more yourself. You're authentic. Versus if I were to show up with the mentality of this is a pity invite, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to be reserved. I'm not going to want to speak up and be loud or be myself. And then that's going to perpetuate the belief that no one wants me to be here.
What you think, feel, and say to yourself makes all the difference. And I completely agree with, first of all, approaching a social situation, reframing that mindset is so important. And while you were talking, I was thinking like, okay, in my case, with the heels, I think it's about fear of being judged, right? Again, it's that fear of being perceived. Maybe it's like, she's too much. She's trying too hard. Whatever it is, like, what are you afraid of going into that situation? What is your brain telling you? And then trying to find that redirected thought, which for me might be something almost comforting, which is people aren't focusing on you as much as you think.
Yes.
Right. And I think a lot of people pleasers feel like there's a lot of focus on them in the room and how they're behaving and if they're fitting in properly, when really most people aren't paying that much attention to you after all.
Yeah. I had one of my clients who's a teacher, and she had one of those like award ceremonies at the end of this year, and she never wears anything that shows her legs or anything that shows her knees. And this is the first year after doing a lot of body image work. She said, you know what? I'm going to wear what I want. It is so hot outside. I'm going to wear a dress, and I am going to go into it with the mentality that no one cares as much as you think they do.
Yes.
And what she said was super interesting is when she got there, like all of these kids ran up to her and said like, we're so happy that you're here. And that was the second thing that I wrote down about what you said, which was go for it and try it. Oftentimes you have to put yourself in those situations to remind yourself of like, yeah, this is true. People are happy that I'm here, not because of the way that I look, but because of who I am. And everyone is always focused on themselves. And that's one of the things that I keep reminding myself too, is like, no one cares about you as much as they care about themselves. And if you're feeling self-conscious, they're having the same insecurities, even if you can see it or not.
100%. And I actually just gave a talk on something similar to this, like the mindset you have when going into social situations. But if you're sitting there criticizing yourself, like, I'm not charismatic enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not skinny enough, whatever it is, it's a really actually self-centered mindset to live in and socialize from that place. So what you really want to do is turn the attention outward and reframe that and say, I'm here to show interest in other people, right? I am here. If I want this situation where I'm in a social setting to go well, it's not going to go well if I'm sitting here criticizing myself. It's going to go so much better if I turn my attention towards others. There's even this theory called the theory of inferred attraction, which essentially means people like people who show interest in them, period. That's it. So yes, it's like people aren't focused on you as much as you are. And in order to remedy that, it's okay to focus on, other people. And it can be very healthy to do that.
I'm laughing because I definitely have heard this theory before. And when I started practicing it, I am naturally a very curious person. And I'm sure that you are too. As a coach. You are probably so interested in like anyone's lives. Like, tell me about your childhood, tell me about your trauma. Like, I'm so just like interested in learning about people's lives. And what I've seen is, especially when I'm meeting like my boyfriend's new friends, they'll be like, oh my God, we love your girlfriend. And I always laugh because all I did was I got you to talk about yourself. And people love talking about themselves. And so when you can, I love that idea of just like shifting the attention away from inwards, away from yourself, and just being like, how can I ask questions? How can I get curious? How can I be interested in other people? And you're going to notice how much easier it is to connect, to be present, and to really enjoy your time there.
Yes, yes. It's so important to be able to show interest in other people and just bring it back to people aren't focused on me as much as I think when it comes to things like body image, right? Like, and I do want to remind people pleasers that we are allowed to take up space and embrace the questions people ask us. So again, like if someone asks your opinion about something, don't just mold yourself to what they are trying to say, right? You can have a conflicting opinion with someone and it's not an argument, right? You're not hurting them. You can have a mature conversation, right? So remember, like, yes, we want to focus outwards. So important for connection, but remember that you are worthy and important, and it's okay to take up space when it comes to sharing about yourself and expressing your truth and your authenticity. So it's that balance of making sure you own who you are. Don't abandon yourself so that the person you're talking to likes you more.
Absolutely. I love that you emphasize that. And what was coming up for me, which I know is probably not going to be a question that one of my listeners are asking themselves, but it's happening underneath the surface, which is that most people, whether it's from a childhood wound, the attachment to their parents, things that happened in elementary school or even younger, there's this feeling of a lack of safety. It doesn't feel safe to set boundaries. It doesn't feel safe to communicate your needs. It doesn't feel safe to put yourself first. And so for those people who are like, yeah, this all sounds great, right? Like, I
Mhm.
understand I want to take up space. I understand I have to set boundaries, but there's like this visceral reaction. Your nervous system won't let you do it. It's like, this isn't safe. You're going to lose people. You're going to be alienated. What can those people do to start building up that sense of safety, that it is safe to move away from people pleasing and to step into my own power?
Yes. Okay. So, first of all, we just have to unpack your associations with things like boundaries and your negative connotations with things like boundaries or being an advocate, sticking up for yourself, assertive communication. Like when I talk about assertive communication, most people pleasers think it's mean. They're like, oh my God, it's so rude, it's imposing, it's disrespectful. But frankly, being assertive is neutral. So you have to start to identify and accept that the things that you have these visceral reactions to are inherently neutral. And you're the one with the negative connection to it. So, something like setting a boundary is going to be a neutral circumstance, believe it or not. It is not mean. It is not disrespectful. It's being able to reclaim your energy and sense of self, and all the while giving that person the opportunity to honor and respect you.
Mm-hmm.
So how it's not about this is a mean thing. It's about how you communicate that boundary. If you communicate that boundary and you're mean and you're horrible and you're like finger pointing and blaming and starting a fight and crying and making it this really horrible scene, that's going to feel like a really disrespectful, like a boundary is going to feel disrespectful. But you can express your needs calmly, kindly, respectfully, and it involves some tact, right? You have to have some emotional awareness and communication skills to do this. But it comes down to how you communicate the boundary, and it comes down to how you express yourself. So remember those and statements. It's like you can be assertive and kind at the same exact time. And
Mm-hmm.
people who have that visceral reaction have never seen that done before.
Yeah, I love that you talked about like reframing what it even means to set a boundary. And when you can bring awareness to the fact that a boundary is a sign of self-love, that you are not only allowed, but you are encouraged to do that. And it's not only going to be beneficial for you, but it's going to be beneficial in all relationships. Then if the person reacts poorly to you setting a boundary in a way that is loving and kind, then you can start evaluating like, okay, is there changes that need to be made in this relationship? Are there more boundaries that need to be set? Because a person who is truly the right person for you, who is your kind of person, who appreciates, respects, and loves you, is going to maybe when you first set the boundary, it might throw them off because you've never done it before. But if it's really someone who wants to stick around and have a relationship with you, it's like a really great filter, right?
Yeah.
Because when you are a people pleaser, when you have no boundaries, what tends to happen is you're good with anyone, right? Like anyone can kind of stick around and be in your life. And I find that for me, especially, like I'm very selective about the people that I give my time and my energy to. I know that it's precious. And so I'm not going to be surrounded by people who don't respect me, who don't align with my values and the kind of life that I want to create.
Yes. Being like healing from people pleasing involves recognizing that your needs matter. That's really it. It's like your needs, your values matter. So when you set that boundary, you're honoring your needs, maybe for the first time, but it's really important to practice that because the more you do it, the more self trust you have, the more self respect you have. Like, if you're someone who constantly gives other people permission to bulldoze over you and take advantage of you, you're going to be living in a state of resentment and energy drain. But
Mm-hmm.
by setting those boundaries or expressing yourself properly, you reclaim a little bit more of yourself back, right? And
Yeah.
you are healing in that process. And I'm telling you, it doesn't take much to start feeling the difference there. And then you realize this boundary is so necessary, even though maybe just a few months ago, it would have been really hard for me to say no. Oh my gosh, that's another sign you asked me in the beginning. Difficulty saying no. Big people
Yeah.
pleasing red flag right there.
Yeah. And I hope that as people are listening and as we're wrapping this up, you're starting to see how not only like important but really necessary it is to start reflecting on people pleasing tendencies and start being intentional about setting boundaries, because every time that you don't, you are leaking your power away left, right, and center. And it's really hard to be a powerful human being who takes control of your life, who takes control of your relationship with food, with your body, with yourself, with people, if you're constantly giving your power away to other people. So I'm really glad that we talked about this. It's such an important topic. And thank you, Megan, for being so insightful and sharing everything that you know about your past and about how to start healing from people pleasing is so important.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. It's been a total joy to be here. I love talking about this topic. You're a delightful host, and it's been so nice just talking to you today.
Thanks so much for being here. And lastly, for anyone who wants to find you and connect with you, where can they do that, Meg?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. So first of all, if anybody wants to find me, they can find me on Instagram, which is Meg_McCabe. Or I think if you want to learn from me at no cost, check out my podcast, which is Full and Thriving Podcast. Maybe some of you have heard it. I think we have some overlap with listeners, but I think overall those are the two best places to start.
Awesome. So I'm going to link all of that in my show notes for them to find you. Thank you so much for being here, Meg. I appreciate you.
Aw, thanks, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magna Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.